Welcome to One Foot in Both Worlds, Keeping It Real with Tania and Nette. Hey Tanya, how are you?
I am very well, Nettie. How are you doing?
Well, pretty good. In the spirit of keeping it real, I'm actually sitting in my walk-in wardrobe. It's my weird background. Okay. My husband, we had a big Christmas party last night. We're back for a few days between Vietnam and heading down interstate for Christmas. And my husband came in. He's normally a workaholic, and he's like, "I'm so tired. I've had 3 hours sleep. Can I go to bed?" And I'm like, we live in a studio apartment type thing in the bush. And I'm like, oh, I was going to record. So I'm like, don't worry, my son's in the other room. We have a two-room house except for the walk-in robe. So here I am. I I won't do a zoom around and show you, but if I look awkward in the back corner, it's because I'm clogged in the corner.
I love
Um,
it.
I am so excited to talk about today, but also I am still thinking about our last episode. So if you didn't watch our last episode, please go and watch it or listen to it. Tanya talked about an incident that happened to her and how using her pineal and being in the right space within it made her be able to process those emotions. That's kind of a brief summary, but it was pretty full on, and I haven't been able to get it out of my mind. There's so many elements to it that that I just need to process. And it made me actually feel how you felt when the download come through and you had to look at that and actually process the information as I did when I got the download, and my husband when he heard it, and that sort of stuff, and any listeners will. It's really funny, I think, when you have an impactful thing in your life, how much you need to almost pause before you speak and really think about and process that and make sure that that energy doesn't get stuck in yourself. Because like I was emotionally affected by what you said. Um, and I was thinking about that guy and that he's still out there and still doing stuff to people, and how far
Hmm.
will he go? Like, and I thought, wow, I'm actually going in my conscious space. I'm going straight to my conscious and getting caught in the emotion of it. So I had to really sit myself back in my pineal and say, okay, look at this from a big picture point of view. So thank you for sharing that, because it was, again, miss experience. It was a really good listen. So please go back and listen to it. But at the end of the podcast, I promised that I would talk about a couple of things that happened in Vietnam that are part of that whole New Peace series and how they affected me. So I'm going to just say hi to you first, probably, because before I just keep talking and don't stop.
Just go
How
ahead.
how were you after the podcast? How did you feel after talking about that? And
I'm fine. I've had my processing. I'm at the point that I just kind of giggle about it and think that it's funny. It was a very traumatizing experience, but yeah, no, it's processed. I'm good.
how wonderful is that in such a short time, though? That just talks about, where you're at
It
with,
just explains it. Yeah, it
yeah,
really does.
it's
Yeah.
awesome.
But no, go ahead. I want to hear about Vietnam.
Okay. I'll talk about that. There's two main incidences, other than the fact that I have a Vietnamese friend. She's half Vietnamese, and I haven't seen her in 18 months. And so we were over there, and her father was in the war, and he died from Agent Orange poisoning. And um, she I just hadn't seen her for ages, and I kept thinking about her. And I was talking to someone as we went through the tunnels, the Chi Chu tunnels and things like that. And she was like top of my mind. Anyway, the next day she messages me, just thinking about you, haven't spoken to you in 18 months. And I'm like, she had no idea I was in Vietnam. So I thought, isn't it funny how when you put your energy into someone, that person also, you know, over the sea gets that feeling that you're thinking about them, sort of thing. So that was kind of cool. Um,
This
but
happens to me all the time.
yeah, and I think it happens to everyone. I think that shows how our energies connect, right?
Yeah.
They go into each other. All right, we went to the Opera House in Ho Chi Minh City, so in Saigon, in the capital of Vietnam, and we watched this awesome basket weaving acrobatic show. They had like these, sort of cane baskets, and they'd throw them around these massive bamboo poles, and they would dance around this acrobatic thing. Anyway, we got in there, and there was seating up the side. You know how they kind of have seating around where you can pay to go in the little booths in the windows and they had
Yep.
curtains shut on
Yep.
it. And we were looking at them and we were like, they're pretty shit seats. Like you'd probably pay more for them, but they're shit. They've got the curtains closed because you couldn't quite see the stage. Anyway, everyone's waiting, and then all of a sudden the lights went down and all the curtains open and the lights went on in those, and all the acrobats came out of these things and cheered at us and did that. And the energy in the room went from like this kind of a what's happening mellow energy to an instant high energy of like, and everyone clapped and roared, and it was like this. And when I clapped, I was like, oh, my wrist hurts. That's a bit weird. And so they came down onto the stage and they started their acrobatics, and every now and then my wrist would just hurt, and it got worse and worse. And it was to the point I couldn't even clap my hands. I was like, I think I've broken my wrist from the first clap. It was just like painful. I was sort of holding it against my body and clapping on my wrist and on my leg with my hand because I couldn't do it. It was an amazing high energy performance. It was just constant. And then they do sort of a mellow energy and high energy.
Hmm.
And as it finished, I was like, I said, Andy, I've really hurt my wrist. And he's like, have you? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, what, in there? And I said, I actually, this is going to sound super strange, but I think some performer is actually has either broken or damaged their wrist badly. And when the whole frequency of the energy went up, I tuned into that person. And now every time they land on their wrist or do something with their wrist, my wrist hurts. And he's like, wow. And it's happened to me before when I pick up, like as a medical medium, you know that too. You can sort of feel, I mean, I'm more of a feeler. You just get this knowing, right? You get this brilliant, okay, you've got this and this. Whereas I
I'm a
physically,
feeler too. I'm a
yeah,
feeler too, but
yeah.
I
But you
don't,
know when you get that,
it's,
yeah,
yeah.
I get like,
Yep.
oh, I feel like I've got diarrhea. I've got this, I've got that when I'm
Yeah.
tuning into people, right? I go,
Yeah.
there's got to be a balance of coming back somewhere, but that's how my intuition works. And so I left the building, and as I walked away from the building and the energy ceased and got less and less, I started to go, oh, my wrist is fine. And we went to dinner and I'm looking at my wrist and I'm like, it's absolutely fine. And it was just gone. I didn't have it again. So I am 100% sure that someone in that performance, I really wanted to actually message them and say, could you just confirm that someone is actually playing? And they do so many nights, and we were one of the last nights. I think we might have been the last night, or there was one more night after us. And so I think whoever it was just, strap it up, take some Panadol, get out there kind of thing. So I thought that was pretty cool because if anyone who's watched the frequency new piece video, I think that was the fifth one, just showing how when you go into a frequency, you can go from not being tuned into people to being tuned into people. And I'm obviously on another level for that. That's kind of, you and I have a different mediumship kind of frequency tuning
Frequency.
in. Yeah.
Hmm.
But it was an instant. And as I got out of that frequency and back down to where I was in, Ho Chi Minh City, which was buzzing within itself, it just went away, and also I was away from the person, I suppose. So yes, I thought that was super cool. I was like, oh, this is a real direct reflection of how frequency can change in an instant and how you can go back, and in some ways that's how meditation works, or sound, like when you're listening to music and you get these feelings all of a sudden and that sort of stuff. That's because that music or that group. And I do a lot of energy circles, and I think a lot of people in energy circles say, when we do the energy healing for the first time, they can feel actually that energy in your hands. It's because everyone else's frequency pulls you up to this sort of combined area where you go, oh my gosh, I can feel that now. I've got, I'm sitting in those senses. So yeah, that was kind of my cool little very sore broken wrist um experience.
It is so interesting that you're bringing this up because as I'm chatting with spirit and I'm kind of understanding, sitting in that pineal in that more sort of open space, what also was coming up for me, because I used to be like that. I would be so sensitive to everybody's energy all around me. Like somebody would sit down beside me and I would have back pain for them. I would have panic attacks for them. I would, and I've talked about it before on the podcast. And so I was kind of trying to go to spirit and be like, but what was I doing? Like, what is it that had me picking up on all of those things? So, like, was it a frequency? Was it where I was sort of sitting within my state? Like what was it? So I'm super happy that we're unpacking this. And frankly, I don't have an answer
Yeah.
for why I operated like that because I was eventually able to kind of rein it in and get quote unquote control of it because then I was able to shut off sort of what I'm picking up on and get more into my logical brain. But I was like, was I too far back? Like, why was that happening?
Yeah, and I think it is a combination. I think that's the whole point of the new piece, that each piece is important. I think it is where you sit in your pineal. I think it is what the frequency is, because I was sitting in the same part of my pineal before and after the frequency changed. But that instant frequency change, which I wasn't expecting, put me into a thing where I was just like, whoa, I've tuned into someone. And I think what I did do, I think I know who it was. And I'm pretty sure when the curtains opened, I caught contact eye, and they were all looking down at us. And one of the girls up there just directly caught contact with me, and she was one of the most athletic. She was just absolutely amazing. And I think I just tuned into her. And I do sit
Uh,
very open to that. There was actually a family behind me, and I could feel them before, and the boy had oversensitivity. So he's in the country. His mum and dad were there. You could feel the tension between the mum and dad. And so I just detached myself from that. I could feel myself tuning in and being very empathetic and starting to get an emotional thing. So I blocked that off because I didn't want to sit. I didn't need their energy.
right. It
I'm trying
serves
to
no
watch this show.
purpose.
Yeah. And so I could kind of do that, but I think this because it went so fast and I wasn't expecting it. And it was a good buzz. Like with that frequency that came in with her, although it did affect my wrist, it also, I was watching the show in a whole different light, right? So yes, you can go, okay, this is not my wrist, and I can sort of step out of it. But I was enjoying the show so much. I was happy to put up with my wrist, which is funny because I think she was enjoying doing the show so much that she was happy to put up with her sore wrist, and
Hmm.
she loved performing so much, and she was a major role in it. So, I can see where that came from. But I do think it's a whole combination. And, you and I are aware that it is a complex, as much as we talk about the simple side of it, is a very complex thing when you're talking about sitting in your pineal. And they show that there's several ways to do that. And as mediums, we sit in this other one. And I think in everyone can do this in a small way, but sometimes people will just sit there naturally in a big way, and that's where we do a mediumship. And they showed me like a little log with like people sitting on it, and the first person was like yourself. And I think when you go to the pineal and you sit within just yourself, that's where you want to aim to be. You want to be in a position where you can hear yourself, where you can hear your own spirit. And so when you're getting messages and stuff and they say, who is this from? It's from you. It's the internal subconscious messages that you've been loaded down, or even going past the subconscious into the direct source
Like
as
spirit.
of spirit, yeah. But then you can sort of move over, and they showed me the next person. It was quite funny. It was like little birds sitting on a log, but they were actually people. And that's other people. And I think that's what I did. I moved and I tuned into this other person, but directly into her. So I started to feel that. And I enjoyed the energy of everything else, that I was happy to put up with the sore wrist and not sort of jump back. And when you go into a room and then someone comes in and you just get their energy and just like, whoa, and so you
Hmm.
detach from it. And when you know how to detach from it, it's great. But other times someone comes in the room and he's like, anyone who's met Tania in person, you walk in the room and she's just like, hey, everyone, blah, blah, blah. She's got this energy, right? You don't want to detach from that. Like, you want to go out in the town with that, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then after 3 hours, I want to go to bed, but Tanya can go out and still, I'm like, oh, I can't run at your energy. But we all sort of tune in and out of that kind of thing. And when someone comes in with a higher frequency, and if you can attach to it, you can enjoy their thing. So that's kind of like tune into yourself, tune into others. It's how far can you tune into others. Then they showed me like the third person, which was actually tuning into people that aren't here. So it's like it's other spirits that aren't directly in front of you or directly yourself. And then they had these little ones on the side, which was like being able to tune into the energy of like trees and animals and water and all those sort of stuff. That not just the energy, but the soul and the spirit of the animal, or the soul and the spirit of the tree. And they didn't go much into that, which was quite interesting. They sort of sat at these three saying, these are the main three that people are actually tuning into. And so when you go into your pineal, it's like, you know, if I'm doing something like the flood work, or you're doing your everyday drama of policing, you know, when you get into higher things, if you were sitting in that second person where you're tuning into everyone, it would be a disaster.
Not
But if
good.
you sit in your first one, in your pineal, just at the edge of your consciousness and just for yourself, then you will just act like blah 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 blah. And it's just like, wow, how is she so in control, and how is she doing everything? And it's because you're not sitting in the emotional state of your consciousness, just going, oh my gosh, oh my, what are we doing? Oh, this is so dramatic. This is so bad. These people, like, you're not in that, you know?
Yeah.
And I think it's learning to move and understanding that there is different spots on there that you've got to kind of be in. Um,
Yeah, the different states of mind. And it's so
yeah,
cool as you're talking about this, because when I do a reading, say somebody comes in and they just want like an intuitive sort of message about kind of what's coming up for them, that's one level that I tune into. And then if they say, "Oh, but I want to do some medical mediumship," I click into a different one
yeah,
to do medical mediumship. And then if they want to connect to spirit, I click into a different one. So it was so cool when you were talking about that, that I was being, they were like, they were showing me how I kind of click into those sort of different states of mind.
yeah.
I
Different
love that.
positions almost, isn't it? It's like,
It's
it's
hard to
just,
explain. Like we need a word for it.
yeah, yeah.
Almost, it's because it's almost like I wish I had something on my desk that I could. It's
They,
like
they, they keep
here's a
showing me that.
charger. It's like this, and it goes like this with different spaces on the dial.
Yeah. Well, they keep
You
showing me
know,
that theater that I was in, and they're like, depending on where you sit in the theater, it depends on what you can see and what you can tune into. So it's almost like that with the dial that you're saying. If you're over here, you can tune into yourself. But if you move over here, you can still see yourself, but you can see. If you pay $500, you get front row seats, and you can see everything, you know.
right?
But you can also go too far to the front where you're just looking at this, and your whole subconscious is not there. So it's like finding the best seats in the house for what the situation is. Because sometimes you don't want to see other people's shit. You just want to look forward.
No,
Yeah,
no,
you know.
110%. And I don't. And I have managed to, sort of have that off on switch. But I love that they're showing that there's actually different levels of it. That's really cool.
Yeah, I love it too. And I think it explains so much to us of why and we're different people. They're showing me now. It's not only that, it's if you sit here, you will see it from an emotional point of view. If you sit here, you'll see it from a knowing. If you sit here, you'll feel it. If you sit here, you'll hear it. Like, so you can move around within that space to actually hear, see, feel um, spirit and energies in a different way. I mean, it's going to lead on to another kind of story from just before Vietnam, but related to Vietnam. About 6 weeks before we left for Vietnam, I was obsessed with our visas. I said to Andy, like, I feel like we have to get our visas right. And so I did some research, and it said, you know, on a plane, three people out of like on a plane every time have their visa wrong. Sometimes planes, 1 in 10 people will not get a visa into Vietnam. They're really particular with it. Has to be exactly the same. The dates that you're coming, going. If you're doing an overnight flight, do you do the day you leave or do you do the day there? And if you get that wrong, you don't get your visa. And so we lost our internet for 2 weeks, right? You remember 3 weeks, I think it was. I didn't have
Hmm.
internet. And so I couldn't get these visas done. And I finally kept thinking it'll be back on tomorrow, be back on tomorrow. 3 weeks, I'm like, shit, I've got to get them done. As soon as the internet came up, that was the first thing I did. And my husband comes in and he's like, can you come and help me hold this? And I'm like, no, I can't, because he's a builder and I hold things up. And I'm like, no, I can't. I'm doing the visa. I've just started. And, I can't get
I
this
can't be
wrong.
interrupted.
I can't be interrupted. And he's like, Nettie, big picture, their visas, you can be interrupted. It's a form, honey. It's a form. So I said, if this is wrong, it's on you, because this is not going to be right. He's like, whatever. So I went and helped him. Anyway, I came back and finished his, and it had timed out weirdly, and I got back into it, and then I did mine and my son's. And that was on a Friday. And on Monday, it's an e-visa type system, a new one they've got. I get my visa. I speak to my son, did you get yours? No. And then an hour later goes, yeah, it's just come through. Got it. My husband, did you get your visa? No. Next day, husband, did you get your visa? No. Because we had to use all different email addresses, right? So he's looking on the other email. Did you get it? And he goes, yes, it came through, but it said there's an error. It's incorrect. And I'm like,
Mm.
I knew that. I knew it was going to be incorrect. I told you not to disturb me. This is on you. What do I have to do? So I looked at and I don't know why he didn't do it, but I fixed it, right? Went
Mhm.
on and he didn't have his middle name. It said Andrew McCoubrey didn't have his middle name. So I went, added his middle name. But everything was written in Vietnamese except for the words I'd put in. So I added his name to the end, but I couldn't understand anything else. Sent it off. 4 days later, it comes back. Visa's fine. We're leaving in a week. Heaps of time. What was I worrying about? And then I went to print it and realized, oh shit, we don't have a printer. So I rang my sister and said, can you print them? We're leaving in the morning. Of course, she'll leave at last minute. And she's like, yeah,
Mhm.
get there. And she goes, my printer's not working. It's just sitting in a queue. And I'm like, I knew this. I knew this. Anyway, she goes, hang on, I'll delete everything. And then she's, no, here they are. They'll print. So I'm like, oh, okay. So we're going to the airport. We got our visas printed out. We got everything. I was so wrong about the visas. We get lost in Sydney. The damp band sends us the wrong way, and then we follow this sign. It tries to make 4 lanes to go across to the right. There's no way we could do it, so we took another. Anyway, we're like 40 minutes late to the plane. We left about 50 minutes before we should get on it, which is so stupid for an international flight. You should leave more, but we didn't. Thank God, last minute I decided to do valet parking. So we just drove in, they took my car, and we ran to the thing. We got there with 15 minutes to go. Does my visa, my passport here, yes, a check in, my son, da, da, da. Gets to my husband's and goes, his name's incorrect. His surname is where his first name should be, and his first name is backwards. And they won't let you into Vietnam like that. You can't get on this plane. And we're like, no. And I looked across at my husband. Now, because I'd had these premonitions that something was going to go wrong with this, I looked into what you can do about this. And I said, we can get a temporary visa. We can get one now. And the lady said, no, you can't. There's 6 minutes to go. It takes a minute, takes them 10 to 20 minutes to do it if they're rushing. And it's up the other end of the airport. I said, we will do it in 6 minutes. Like, we will get this done. And instantly, the family just went, she said, we've got to go to counter G1 to do it. So we're like, run. So my husband runs off the wrong direction. My son runs the right direction.
Yay.
Yeah. And he's at the right spot with Andy running off somewhere else. And he's yelling out across the whole airport, Dad, Andy! The whole airport turns around, looks across at Will, and Andy's like, what? Come this way. Right. So our 6 minutes is already taken up. And I'd caught up to Will by then. I'd gone in and said, we're going to Vietnam. My husband's visa's wrong. It's like, where's your husband? He's like, he's coming back the wrong way. It's just like, and she said, well, you can't do it. When's your check-in time? We said, it's now 3 minutes. And she's like, you can't do it. It takes 10 minutes. We go, no, it will. This will happen. I've seen this. I've dreamt this. This will happen. And so anyway, the lady walks out the back and she says, we'll make this happen. And instantly they were just like ringing people and taking a photo of him, getting a passport. And within like the 3 minutes is up, my son ran back to the counter and said to the first lady there going, my dad's just got a temporary visa. It's just been done. Can we check in? She goes, no, you can't. You're too late. Sorry. And he goes, okay, thank you very much. So then he walks up to the next person. He goes, excuse me, you're meant to help us today. My dad has just got a temporary visa. It's been printed. He's running here now. Can you? She goes, the flight's been closed. There's nothing we can do about it. And Will said, there's always something you can do about it. So, can we speak to someone? And I just come around the corner at the same time. And they said the only way to do it is a supervisor. So Will's like, supervisors. So we're running up the other end of the thing. Meanwhile, we don't know where Andy is. He's still getting his printed. He's probably lost. We're just like, whatever. And I went up, I go, my husband's literally running here now with his piece of paper. It's done. And she goes, oh, we can't get your luggage on. We're like, we've got hand luggage. And we decided that we would just take hand luggage over. And instead of all the rest of the luggage. So there we are. And the lady goes, I've never normally do this, but she said, you got hand luggage, which is very rare for an international flight, but I will open it and close it if you promise me you'll run to customs to get through and all that sort of stuff. I'm like, yeah. And she literally opens it, does it. We run through customs, get through, go to the plane, the last boarding for the plane. We literally get on, sit down and go, we do that. It's just like, but and
Do you
then
know what
Andy
I
turns around to
find?
me and goes, "Oh
Sorry.
my God, Nettie, you knew this was going to happen. Like you told me this 6 weeks ago, and yet we corrected it twice. Like it didn't matter what we did, this was meant to happen."
That's exactly what I was just going to say is this is something interestingly that they've been showing me is that you can't do it differently even if you tried
Yeah. But
in so many situations.
if you are in the right frame of mind, like the three of us, especially my son and I, we were just in the groove. We were just like, he's highly intuitive anyway. But also, I know I dreamt it. I dreamt it several times. I know the lady that walked around the corner, she was familiar. I'd seen her before. So it was so much easier. And I wouldn't be surprised if she had dreamt the same situation where she was going to help these people. And the lady who let us in the baggage, I wouldn't be surprised if we were kind of already, if this situation comes up, you're prepared for it. And that's what, when you go back to listen to the one we talk about dreams and even the subconscious is really cool, the way it does and what processes why we're asleep. I think all these scenarios go through. So when we're in that scenario, we just seem to know what to do. Like, yeah, I'd done a bit of research on it to know you could get one, but just the way it flowed in an impossible amount of time for us to get on the flight was, beyond it. And we've never got lost in Sydney to go to the airport. We've been there many times. So that was weird too, the fact that it delayed us. And the fact that
Right.
last minute I decided to get valet parking, because if we didn't get that, we just wouldn't have made it. So, all those little things are just, you look back and you go, how much of this is free will? How much of this is ordained? How much of this is
Yes.
a combination of the two? You know, like,
Yes. How much is really actually free will, or is free will just us just us thinking that the choices that we're making are changing the outcome when in fact, and they've said this to me
we've
fairly
talked about this,
recently.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, fairly
Yeah.
recently that you couldn't do it differently if you tried.
Yeah.
And the thing that I love about that is when we learned in this for me, like when we learned about the subconscious and the conscious and the pineal and all of that, and some of it I was doing, the key piece that I was missing was sitting in that pineal for processing things happening, right? Which was a big deal. And it ticked me off because I was like, why didn't I know this before? Like, how much easier would my life have been had I sort of had that understanding to be able to process in that space?
Yeah.
Because it's seamless. Like it goes really well and nice and easy. And I'm looking back on the amount of times that my life could have been easier had I been processing there. And that's when they were kind of coming in and going, you couldn't have done it differently even if you tried.
Yeah. And I think it's the destination that's the same. So for us, there was going to be an issue with the visa. It was just the destination that we had some control in something. But whatever happened there, we're putting me back to, yeah, okay, so you've picked up that you've done that wrong, but we're going to fault it anyway. And you're going to end up in this situation, beforehand. But there was different paths we could have taken. So I think our free will is kind of the paths, but the destination, like with the dream I had of Andy, right? My husband, I had this dream that I didn't go there, and I stayed with this other guy, but I ended up in the same destination meeting him at 51 regardless, right? And I think we do have a certain amount of free will, and we definitely have choice, but ultimately we're going to end up at the same point. So, and if you're meant to have a certain trauma, you're going to have it, whether you have it tomorrow or in a week or, you know 3 months or whatever, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And yeah, but there is a certain amount of choice and free will, which does make it easier. And I think you sit in the pineal anyway, right? You have been for so long. You can't be a medium the way you are with amazing talents if you didn't. I think now it's the recognition that you're there, and then you start to go, hang on a minute, I'm way too emotional in this. I could just sit back in there and do this again. I think the knowledge is the power there.
I don't know that I have always sat in the pineal. I have sat in that little space behind it to tune in,
Yeah.
space in front of it to be more in my logical. I haven't been as close to the pineal as I do as I walk through life now.
Yeah, but I think you're
That
there more often than you used to. Like, I think you go when people do things
now,
intuitively,
yes.
when people do things intuitively, which you would have done for a lot of your life, you sit, that's where you're sitting. When everything is just intuitively done, you sit there. It's kind of, when you listen to music or you're doing the dishes and you're just not kind of, you're conscious, but you're not conscious. That's, you're
Yep.
sitting in that center point. I think we all do that. It's just, how do I go in and out of there now? And what's
Yeah.
happening? What's the
Yeah.
difference, I think, is the
But I
power
would almost go like I feel like I would go almost intuitive and then I would go
to,
straight back to logical.
yeah. So you're sitting either edge and not spending enough
Yep.
time in that center where you're actually just
Yeah.
really nicely in tune with yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
then two, you said in the podcast last week, you said that, you can see me sort of being in this sort of level of comfort, like within
Yeah.
myself. And you know what I really think that is that I came to a level of acceptance and understanding of being the experiencer. Because
Yeah.
when you sit back and you look at the entirety of this podcast, what do we have, like 160? I can't remember. We have like
Yeah.
60 videos and a bunch of shorts. When you look back, I would say in just about every single episode, I am speaking in some way, shape, or form about my experience with everything that's happened. And we talked about patterns, and then I was going through a relationship that was a pattern. All the things, I have so much experience in it. So I kind of got to this place, which is what they said to me. Yeah, because I was like, dudes, come on, man. Like, couldn't you have told me this earlier? And that's when they were like, you couldn't have done this differently, even if you tried.
Yeah.
And then I felt grateful and honored
Yeah.
to be receiving this information because up until receiving this, I was kind of a piss off,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know. But yeah, I can't remember exactly what my point was there, but I find it very, very interesting. And I'm coming to a deeper level of acceptance of sort of, this is my role.
Yeah. And I think it's a beautiful gift. I think what you have, Tanya, is to be so intuitive and to be a medium and have that understanding. So you're open to all of that, but then also to have the experiences. Then we get these downloads, and then you can just merge them into your life and explain to people what difference they make in a way that is very real, is what makes the formula of why spirit put us together. Like,
Yeah,
why did we ended up together in the weirdest way
yeah,
and had an instant friendship? And it was like we actually don't know much about each other, but we are so close. And when we're
yeah,
not talking, we miss each other. It's you have such an important role in One Foot in Both Worlds, and such an important role for people to listen to. Like I love that we're doing this, and I love to hear the experiences, even though they're hard and all those sort of things, because I learn from them. Like I'm still learning from the one we did the last episode. I'm
right.
still thinking about that. I'm still doing that. And if you didn't have that openness and those experiences, I wouldn't be,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, I think that's a beautiful gift. Like,
yeah.
you
It's
know,
yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting, but I've just kind of found some peace with it
you're comfortable with it. Yeah.
because Nettie, you know how many temper tantrums I have had. I'm like, this is absolute shit.
Yes, I did get random texts from it every now and then, just
Yeah,
saying, "Hey,
yeah,
spirit."
yeah. There's something that I wanted to bring up because right around I can't remember when it was, but it was when I was sort of processing the pineal and the conscious and the subconscious. I was watching one of our videos on YouTube. I just watch them sometimes because I like them, and it puts me into this nice high frequency because I can feel our energy. So it puts me in a high
We
frequency
are
when
the
I listen
total
to them.
opposite listeners, by the way. I don't listen to anything. Tanya listens
Yeah,
to
I
everything.
do. Yeah, I like the frequency of them.
Yeah.
And the next one that popped up on YouTube was the Jay Shetty. He's quite a
Oh,
famous
yeah. I don't know.
YouTuber, and he's got a podcast and stuff. And he had this intuitive medium on there. Her name was Laura, I believe it was Laura Lynn Jackson. And this was super fascinating to me. She was talking about how she's actually done like when they put brainwave
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
things on their brain and measuring her brain activity as an intuitive. And she said that some of the results of it were really interesting because when she would go into that space where she was connecting with spirit, the front part of her brain would go dark, and she was pointing to the middle of her head,
Yeah.
and she goes, and then back here it would light up. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was fascinating
Yeah. Yeah.
to actually have that science kind of connect into the like what we're talking about. It
Yeah.
was really cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
I don't know if we can like link another podcast to
Oh,
ours, but
I think we can tag it in the base. Yeah.
okay. But
But
the
inter
science piece of it and her explaining it was absolutely fascinating because we had just kind of, been like you and I together unpacking the conscious and subconscious.
yeah, and your frontal lobe is this part here is where time and familiarity, so all those things actually exist. Reality exists in this front. If you don't have that, like when my husband has seizures, he has temporal lobe seizures, right? Which are just in this area, and he loses time and he loses um lots of different things like that, like reality. He looks at people and goes, "Oh, you're someone," and they're not. But you can see why he thinks they are because they have like a similar formula of shape, but he can't recognize them in the reality of like 3D. And so
Interesting.
it's so fascinating. But I look at that with the knowledge that the download that we got, and it makes sense. And the fact that, the kind of time and things like that of the human of world all exist in that little front conscious area. And if your brain bypasses that because of seizures or things like that, you just lose that. Is fascinating. Like, yeah,
So here's something else that's really interesting is I have ADHD, and remember I was saying that spirit was giving me some information about ADHD and autism in relation to this conscious subconscious. I don't fully have the information yet, but my understanding of ADHD is that it's your prefrontal cortex that's almost like asleep. That's
yeah,
why you get prescribed uh, amphetamines, because it will actually spark it to actually work like normal.
yeah, yeah.
But
So that you
but
can
but what it
flow
will
in and out of it
actually,
rather than,
yeah.
yeah, boom, 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 which
Yeah,
is
as
what they
opposed to
do.
sort
Yeah,
of like if you're not medicated, you're really scattered and forgetful and messy and just
yeah,
kind of all over the place. Like, so it'll be really interesting as we move forward for how everything's kind of going to be tied in together because there's more. Like, I feel like there's just so many more pieces.
yeah, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. There is. I mean, memory, like the memory is blowing my mind to the point that I can't even document it. It's
So
it's really
interestingly,
interesting because it's more than just in us. Like I think we're scraping the surface with that, but they show me the
yes.
memory is the only one that actually exists um, in the conscious, subconscious, and then there's a third element. And so we can pick up memory that doesn't belong to our self at the same time. It's quite complex. It's very
Oh.
complex. And
I was one evening I was sitting there watching TV, and I shut it off and I laid there, and they gave me this piece about memory, and then almost like I tried to grasp it
yeah,
and understand it. Poof, it was gone. I was like, okay. But yeah, they showed it to me, and honestly, like right now, if I could, I don't even think that I could fully grasp and explain what it was that they showed me. But when they were showing me, it was making sense.
yeah. I keep going. I wake up with part of it again, but it's so complex. Like,
Yeah.
and what they're trying to do is get me to understand it enough so I can give a simple version like we have with the other ones. So I'm
Yeah.
excited that memory will come down the track. And I think with the information that they're giving you and they're giving me, I think somehow we're going to actually have,
Be able to put it together.
yeah, there'll be a understanding of
Yeah.
it because it's crucial. Like it's an important understanding of
Yes.
how things are
Yeah.
seeded, and I think maybe next week we should talk a little bit about the seeding anyway and how that works.
Absolutely. Because
Yeah.
they it's kind of a cool way in which they showed it to me and sort of how it works. And we touched on it a bit on the last podcast where we talked about when you're in the pineal and you're processing things emotionally from that place, then you don't get those seeds sort of
Yeah.
attached to your nervous system. And for anybody that doesn't have a clue what we're talking about, go to series 2 and watch the videos about the nervous system and all of series 2. And also go to the episode that we talk about past lives. It's interesting because I'll have people say, "Oh yeah, I listened to a couple episodes," but this really is a progressive podcast. Like it starts at the beginning. Series 1, we talk about the language. Series 2, we talk about the nervous system and diet and exercise and mind and all of these things, and then it progresses. So my best advice, and let me know your opinion, but
No.
it really does need to go
Yeah.
from the beginning to follow it through, because the way Spirit kind of worked with us on it is that they would give us information and it would sort of end up in an episode, but then it would come back up later and we'd be like, oh, that's
Wow.
what they're
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I 100% agree. And that's why I think spirit often we want to go and put in this what we think is humanly logical, and spirit's like, no, you're not talking about that today. And it's like,
Right.
whoa, okay, we're doing this. And I think we wouldn't be getting messages in that way if we weren't meant to be showing it in this order. I mean,
Hmm.
feel comfortable if you end up being drawn to past lives and you just want to go and look at past lives. Fine, absolutely do that. But then go back and watch the series in order.
Yeah.
And
Because there's little tidbits in all of them that
yeah,
relate to what we're talking
and
about.
you might listen to past lives again the second time then and go, oh, wow, I get that even
Now
more.
that makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, loving it.
They're encouraging me to ask you to sort of go back to the frequency piece to just kind of almost wrap it up, tie it in a bow.
Yeah. Okay. And I think that experience was one that they put me through to help bring to people that frequency does actually make a difference. It's not just sitting in your pineal, it's not just doing those sort of things. It's actually that energy that's around you and being able to be in an openness is what they keep showing me. An openness to be able to move into a frequency and don't you find your tool. People who like to go for a walk on the beach or whatever they do, or the person that they're just around, be around for that sort of energy and get out of frequencies when you don't want to be. So when you're in a negative space with lots of people and you've got those sort of frequencies, know that you're caught in that, like that you're picking up on other people's things and all that. If you don't want to be in that, get out of that frequency. Don't just go, oh, I'm in this is awful, people are horrible, blah blah blah. It's a lot of this is personal responsibility. It's going back to saying, where am I sitting at? What am I doing? Am I comfortable there? Do I want to be around this energy? Do I not want to be around this energy? And actually being able to move it. And you were saying earlier, like, you taught yourself to move in and out of those energies, out of that kind of thing. And I think that's if you listen to the frequency one, it talks about ways that you can actually move in and out of frequencies. And I think that's the message that they're trying to give us. And also stay open to it. Stay open to hearing new things, seeing new things. They keep just showing me this word openness, openness, openness. And when I do my energy healing, the first thing the number one thing they say, there's 4 steps to it, is openness. If you're not open to this, it can work, but it won't work as well. And I think that's an important message.
Interestingly, one thing that they're showing me is that when you spend a lot of your time in that pineal space where you're quite aligned and your spiritual nervous system and your physical nervous system are balanced together, that you will be at a higher frequency,
Yeah,
is kind of what they're saying. Like it will help you. What they're showing,
absolutely. They all work together.
they're
You've
saying
got to
it will
be in
help
it
it,
to hit
they
it.
it will help it orbit around you, is what
Yeah,
they're saying, which I don't fully understand, but they're saying it'll help it orbit around you. Please, I think it's important. It always cracks me up. You can't just take a glass of water and send it positive vibes and high frequencies and drink it and have high frequency. I hope, if we have taught people nothing else in this podcast, that you got to do the work. You got to, there's a whole lot to it. But yeah,
So you're saying that we're
that
not,
doesn't raise your frequency. I'm sorry, it doesn't.
so you're saying that you're not going to see One Foot in Both World branded water that has high frequency.
Correct.
$5.
Oh, that would be, we would probably sell a lot, actually, if we were like, this water bottle has been sitting in the room when we were moving energy, so it's full of, and maybe it can hold it. I don't know. But
Yeah. And I
anyway,
think that the
don't
rule
give away our secrets, Nettie.
I think the whole thing is be careful of marketing in that way.
Yeah.
Listen within yourself. Does this sound truthful? And don't get caught up because you can actually, there are ways that don't cost anything. You don't have to buy a bottled water, although we could flash it up on the screen. You don't have to buy a bottled water to get to a different frequency. And you can show, like I did in that theater, I wasn't even expecting it, although I was very open to it. I was open to this performance that was coming on and actually being like consciously within that performance. So I had I was in a really good state of just saying, whatever's coming, I'm ready for it. And I didn't expect a broken wrist. But, if that girl didn't have a broken wrist, that would have been a super awesome thing because I did get the energy from her and I did absolutely love it. And I was enthralled. And my husband walked out going, wow, that's one of the best shows I've ever seen. Like it was amazing. And he was caught up in
Mm,
the frequency as well. And yeah, it was awesome.
I love it. I love it.
Right.
So, with that said, thank you everybody for being here. Please like and subscribe. I am slightly addicted to the analytics on YouTube, and 86.3% of our viewers aren't actually subscribers. So, if
Wow.
you want to make my day where I get to see the subscribe button go up and then message Nettie, go, we're 120.
Mind
Because
you, this is a
I
good
get super
time to go
excited
in.
about it.
A good time to go in because we're on 111 subscribers. So I got back from Vietnam and we're about to come on together and we put out the series and we're on 111 subscribers with 100 videos and I'm like, wow, if that's not, numbers being told to us that we're on the right track,
Yeah.
I don't know what is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's pretty exciting.
yeah.
We're definitely not here for the numbers, but they do make me happy. So we will see you all next week, and I will see you very soon, Nitty.
Bye.